My name's Saif Chaudhry and I run Stereografix. We're a stereoscopic-only consultancy specialising in everything content. We just won a tender to put a projection system in a limestone cave. We're doing some CGI shots for an IMAX film. I'm penciled to consult on 2 features that are starting in the summer. One's British, one's Hollywood, dubbed the Irish version of Braveheart, so that'll be fun. And yeah, some of any of you see the news website How Do? There was a little story that got leaked yesterday that I'm consulting for a big post facility project. It's a Soho-style post VFX house, and it's going to be set up somewhere in the north. So we're looking at Manchester or the northeast, Sunderland, Newcastle, somewhere like that. And it's dubbed the world's first stereo post house because it's not bought a few workstations and sent people on a day's course and they think they can do stereo stuff, but it's proper people trained extensively, and all the workstations, all the screening rooms, everything's going to be designed with 3D in mind. I'm going to start off a bit about the science, so you're going to think you're back in school. And it's actually the only time, I'm not going to go through all the formulas and stuff, but it's the only time I've ever needed to use trigonometry. So there is a reason for using it, because it's very good at telling you calculating parallax, so yeah, your maths teachers weren't crazy. But yeah, I'll just dive straight into it. I've gone through most of this. So we provide a complete service, like I said, of everything. My background, the way I got into stereo 3D was not film industry. I was working on defence projects for the MOD down in Bristol, and we did stereoscopic flight simulators, serious games, training applications, e-learning, everything that you can think of that was done in 2D, we made a 3D version of it. We only got paid for the flight simulator project, but it was a good learning experience. And what I had to do, you can justify buying some things on defence budgets, but big 40 grand 3D rigs, no. Mystica Post Systems, Quantel Pablos, no. So I had to essentially become a systems engineer, make workstations that made 3D work before it was as mainstream as it was now. So it was everything from actually building the stations, speccing them, writing software to make, all the stuff I'm doing is in CS5 because that's what we had and that's what we had to use to do all our posting. And just trying to make it work with the stuff that's off the shelf, because there's only so much, like I said, that you can justify. So the way this is structured, everything is using the cheapest software possible, and it is possible. There's no reason why you can't do stuff with the level that workstations are now, that you can't on the Pablos or the Mysticas and so on. So yeah, we'll jump straight into stereo science. So you've got a little diagram here showing the spectrum of human vision, and the way we sort of see 3D has to be in this space here, and this is defined by the bridge of our nose. So if you close one eye and sort of put it there so you can just see it, close the other one, do the same thing, that space there, that is where your stereoscopic vision starts. And anything in this space, as we look forward, you keep the line going, we will have a depth perception of it, sort of till about there we'll still see it. We won't have a depth sense of it. Well, we will if we move around and your brain sort of knows, because you learn vision by experience, so your brain sort of knows what's going on here, and then extending here is your peripheral vision. And the whole point of stereo 3D is to try and simulate this. So when you're looking at the screen, the content should be made in such a way that your brain is tricked into thinking it's looking through a window into something. There's been quite a lot of debate, and there's a few stories posted on the BBC that our brains can't handle 3D. Well, our brains, if done properly, can handle this better than 2D because it's more natural than what we'd expect to see. Some of the trouble is caused currently if content's not done properly and it's not lit well enough, then your eyes are trying to converge on one point, but they can still see the screen, so they're focusing on the screen. And the other thing is the refresh rate of the projectors. Everything's, even though sometimes you might shoot stuff in 60 frames per second, you're always comping out at 24 frames per second at the cinema. And it has to double those 24 frames 4 times. So you're seeing each frame for four parts of 120, because everything's shuttered, which I'll go through in more detail. But when we're talking about 3D, the first term you'll notice mentioned is parallax. Now the way you describe parallax is like it says in there. When we focus on an object, so you put your hand there, you focus on that, if you put your second finger there like that, close your eye, you'll see in your right eye it will appear more left than the focus object, and in the right eye vice versa. That's called negative parallax, so that makes it look like something's popping out of the screen. So that's what we're trying to replicate. And if you do the same thing and you focus on this and put the object behind, you'll see the opposite happens. So when you're looking at it like this, in the left eye it'll be more to the left of the focus object and more to the right of the focus object in the right eye. And the point at which the image is essentially aligned, that is called the screen point. So that is what will look like it's happening on the screen. And what you're trying to do is tricky, because you're converting, when you're capturing footage, you're converting light into pixels, and then when you see it, you're converting it back into light. So even though you try and measure stuff in pixels, everything's subjective. That's why I told you to stand back there, because when you're looking at the screen, the parallax where you're standing will look slightly smaller than if you were sat here, just because you're nearer to the screen. So everything in 3D is designed for one person sat in the middle of the Odeon Premiere seats to be watching. So that's why they're trying to justify charging £1 extra or whatever it is now for the Premiere seat. What your brain does is, like I said, if something's negative, it looks at the difference between the two images and assigns it a depth value, just represented here by a grayscale image. So anything that's white is, in this particular image, would be towards coming out in front of whatever you're focusing on, and the point at which you're focusing would be 50-50 grey, and as it gets darker, that is going away from whatever you're focusing off, so into the distance. So our brain is basically like a depth sensor, and it combines the two images into this thing which is called a cyclopean image, and that is how we perceive depth. So what we're trying to do is replicate this with stereo content, like I said before, to try and trick the brain into creating a cyclopean image when you're looking at a 3D screen or a cinema or a 3DS, whatever you might be looking at. It's all based on the same principles, sending a slightly different image to each eye to trick your brain into making that. So we'll talk, before I start about the content, we'll talk a bit about the technology. There's two main types of mainstream HD 3D. There's passive and there's active. This is a passive screen, so it works with the cheaper Real D glasses that you can get in the cinema. They've basically got two slightly different polarizing filters on the front of the glasses. So when you see the 3D footage, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Basically, the footage is interlaced on a passive TV screen, so that the top line is your left eye and then the second line is your right eye, and all the way down. So effectively you lose half the vertical resolution, but you don't have to pay 120 quid for the glasses there, or 50p or whatever you might get them for on eBay. And those are matched so that the left eye filter matches the left eye filter in the glasses, and so on. So it goes all the way down. The other type of 3D screen is an active screen, which the little monitor there is active, but I haven't got it working because it doesn't like putting the two together. But you'll need to get yourself a pair of these. This is the active shutter glasses. This is a little infrared emitter that syncs the screen to the glasses. And what the screen does is, so you're sat there, you've got the glasses on. It'll show you the picture for the right eye, and when it's showing you the picture for the right eye, this lens will go black and get covered. So your right eye can only see the picture that's meant to be seen by the right eye, and vice versa for left eye. And it's basically doing that at least 120 times a second, which is why when you said if you're outputting at 24, you've got to multiply it so many times. That's why you sometimes get a strobing effect with 3D. So the solution, like Cameron has just announced, he's going to shoot Avatar in 48 or 60 frames per second, is to up the frame rate, and most of that will go away. So yeah, basically the screen is synced to the glasses, and it's called active because there's something going on. The other's called passive because it's just a filter. Now Realty and Samsung have just announced they've made a new technology at CES, which is a hybrid of the two. So what they've done is they've put a special electronic sheet on the front of the screen, and the screen shutters, but it allows you to use passive glasses. So the electronic thing changes the polarization for the specific lens at the same rate that it's shuttering. So for 120th of a second, it will show the polarization the left eye should see, and for the second 120th, it will show the polarization the right eye is meant to see. Now that's brilliant because you get full HD with passive glasses. So this is the next step, but it's very, very expensive at the moment. I'll touch on it again in this projection technology. What happens at the cinemas? Again, both types of 3D technology are used at the cinema, but excuse me, the shuttering projector basically does the same thing as the TV. It alternates between left and right images, and the glasses are synced up to it. Now there's two ways of getting passive. You could have a dual-headed projector, or two projectors mounted on top of each other, both sort of aligned so they project light onto the same image, and you put the same filter. So you put the left filter on the projector that's showing the left eye, and the right filter on the other one. So basically, two images are getting projected onto the screen, and when they're bouncing off and coming into here, this only lets the left one and that only lets the right one. Just exactly the way it works for the passive TVs. The only thing you have to do differently is you have to have an old school silver screen, because it has to maintain polarization of the light. And with all type of 3D technology, apart from Glasses 3, which you can ask me about later, is basically based on one of these technologies. And no matter what you do, you're always losing some light. So when you're even when you're shooting, which we'll go into later, you can either do two things. You can compensate, or do what Tron did and just let everything look a bit dull and moody when you've got the glasses on. So yeah, you all keep that in mind, that some of the light's lost. And everyone's favourite anaglyph 3D, the red and green or red and cyan filtered glasses. People always like say, oh, you look 1950s, take the piss out of anaglyph 3D, pardon my French, but it's actually a brilliant way of getting into it. If you've not got a big budget to go and buy 3D production monitors, specialist stereo brains or multiplexes, then you can do exactly the same thing with a pair of glasses. And in fact, if I'm out somewhere and I haven't got access to this big lump of a machine and I'm just doing something on the laptop, it uses a lot less processing power. And again, like most 3D packages or comping packages, After Effects, FCP, or the small editing, everything has got an anaglyph output mode. So it's a nice cheap way of getting into it, especially if you're just testing and want to do some quick stuff to have a look. What I'm going to do, I bought that little thing in there. All the footage that's on here, believe it or not, was shot by that. And I'm not saying by any means that you can do anything with it, but it's just to illustrate. Those cameras cost 100 quid each. They were synced, and all the zooms were done by me pressing the thumbstick down because they've got no land control. But it is honestly, it's not as hard to get into, and it's not as expensive as people think. If you want to go and spend 40k on a mirror rig, then you can. But you can get the same thing for £8,000–9,000 if you know where to look.
So you had no syncing problems with that?
Yeah, no, there was no sync, so you'll be quite impressed to see that I managed to make the footage work somehow. Just with my thumbs, all the zooms and everything. So basically, this is what you have to do to the cameras to basically get the two images to trick your brain into making the depth sense. You have to move them slightly apart. So there's two types of ways that you can set this up: parallel, so the cameras are parallel to the rig and move apart, or you can converge on one object. And there's pros and cons of both, and we'll go through that later. But this is an example stereo pair. So this is what the left camera would capture, and that's what the right camera would capture, and this is sort of flipping between the two, so you can kind of figure out what's going on. You can sometimes get a little bit of sense of depth. It's called a stereo wigglegram, I think the technical term is, but you can sort of, if you look around there, you get a little bit of a perception of depth just because it's shifting. But we'll look at it more closely. I've just overlaid it in anaglyph. I'll show it you in 3D in a second. But the terms I was talking to you about, negative parallax, positive parallax, zero parallax, are all highlighted here. So this, the picture is like what I was saying. The left eye is more to the right, and the right eye is more to the left. So this point will look, these things here that are hanging down will look like they're sort of out here somewhere.